solidarity, that's what you have to go across those borders. And I don't know if it's the regressive left, the progressive left, or the subversive left, dismissive left, but without some form of solidarity between us, we're all screwed.
Sorry, if I can just make a comment. I understand the sentiment of the question, but I think it's important that we try to work with people, and we shouldn't really necessarily pigeonhole them, because we'll find people who are on the right to be more than willing to help out. And of course I understand what you're trying to get at, but I think that pigeonholes perhaps may make an obstacle in helping or even operating.
Yeah, my question was on that help, and the question for Gareth was that, drawing on from my experience, is so I was working for a corporate and I wanted to give testimony, political testimony, and fly to America, and my director and the leadership team opposed it, and they said that I would be sacked because of that threat. So I went anyway, to give a physical testimony just in case, just so I could use my job. Which then questions, my question is, doesn't the justice system, well I was made redundant inevitably anyway, and that was based on the prices, gold prices, but my question is, doesn't this come from a justice system that relies on testimonies and physical personal statements when people are not given that comfort of giving testimonies with some protection, and that the case can be helped with testimony? I mean, how would you go about that? How can people help other than giving testimonies? So it's actually a question, I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is, there are people who want to help, and there are testimonies, and surely this is not stopped by the justice system.
Can I add a question to the lady's question? It's kind of linked. I mean, just to you, Gareth, do you think the courtroom scenario with the judges proceeding the cases that have Muslims or a terrorist-related case, do you think, in your opinion, the judges are impartial in these situations, or do you think they're deliberately maybe trying to make a point and put a precedent by giving the harshest penalty so as to create that fear even more so, to kind of resonate and get the titles and put a message out there? Whereas in reality, if they was to genuinely assess the case, maybe it wouldn't deserve a 10, 13-year sentence. It could maybe just do with a 2-year sentence. Whatever the situation is, I don't have the details to it. I'm just putting a hypothetical situation, a scenario. Does that make sense?
I think there's a complete lack of comprehension of the politics or morality of world conflicts and a person's situation within a world they didn't make and a conflict they didn't make. There is no comprehension, there's no memory within judges of what is appropriate or not. So that's why you can have these vastly different sentences at the moment in relation to Syria, just insane differences. There was no comprehension of the judge in Anis Saada's case that Iraq was the most horrible, terrible, brutal, unjust situation.
They don't seem to be even exercising any sort of...
In fact, Anis has got leave to appeal, ironically, on sentence, but not on conviction. Sorry, are you coming this way to shut me up? Witnesses.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, again, in Anis's case, one of the Americans in uniform was given anonymity because he's still working in the military in that sensitive position. So he was known as ABC, whatever. However, because of our application, which apparently has never been made before in a criminal trial, just never come up, for equivalent anonymity for the defence witnesses, which was even more necessary because they had families still in Baghdad or in Syria. There is no equivalent provision in the law, given there's meant to be a concept of equality of arms, there was no equality of arms, so that is a point on appeal. But it's a pretty, look, it's difficult enough to get witnesses in cases anyway, ordinary case, traffic accident, to get a witness in what's flagged up as a terrorist case is almost takes a very brave person. To get a witness in a case for your family, where you ring up the mother the night with your mother the night before you agreed to give evidence in her niece's case, and she says, "Listen, my son, do you understand your uncles, your father, your cousins have all been killed? Do you want to get the rest of us killed? What can that person do?" So,
Yeah, just
Thank you. My question is for Ms. Pierce. First of all, thank you for speaking here today at SOAS. There was an allusion made to the Irish experience by various speakers joining on the table this evening. I know that some years ago you had written a very interesting article entitled "What's It Like to Spoke the Irish?" I was wondering perhaps if you could answer that question. Was this like for the, how apt is the comparison? Is the situation that the Muslim community faces as a community and individual suspects that have been arrested for terrorist or under anti-terrorism law? Is the Irish comparison an apt comparison? Could you tell us in your estimation, is it worse now than it was for them? It's basically my question.
it was a very long essay. We haven't got wrong. There are resonances. Moisen would tell you that when he went to Derry, he felt at home. People in Derry would tell you when Moisen went to Derry, this was a brother who understood. No, nothing is the same. Conflict in Ireland was an armed struggle with a cohesive community involved in that struggle. So relatively confined. There was an organisation, the IRA, which was hierarchical. It had its own objective and strategy. It was reactive to what British soldiers had done, the massacre of Bloody Sunday. Before that, the IRA could not get recruits. After Bloody Sunday, volunteers were there for the next 25 years. Because it was 800 years of memory echoed within that community, because there were international allies, 40 million Americans of Irish descent, there were allies abroad who could be lobbied, persuaded to pressure the British authorities. This is a different experience, totally different experience, and it's propelled by a narrative, and that I see as a narrative that was begun by Blair, that is still being pursued one way or another, and which involves this government in being in alliance with whichever oppressive regime suits its economical, strategic, perceived economical, strategic purposes. So Syria is a proxy war going on now, in which the Syrians are forgotten. There are echoes, there are differences, but we are insane to forget what we learned from history. We are insane, but injustice breeds reaction.
yeah, just this.
My name is Arif Faruqi. I'm the daughter of Munir Faruqi, who my brother Haris he spoke about. in regards to Free Manu campaign. I just wanted to make a comment in regards to my father, where he's been in prison for 6 years now, and he's been in prison purely due to the use of undercover officers and the way they infiltrated our family home as well as the community at large. Not only did they destroy our family, but my father being very well known in the community, where even till this day there's a Christian minister who is a very close friend of his who goes to visit him within the prison itself. So a lot of people have been affected by this and recognise this injustice. So I urge you all to please to get involved in the campaign and inshallah join and help in every way you can. Because if this can happen to a man whose crime is only to care and to be compassionate and to be there to help people, this can happen to absolutely any one of us. And also, one question for Gareth is this whole use of undercover officers throughout my father's trial. Whenever my father's barrister raised the use of undercover officers, the judge always said, well, this was something legal and nothing was done outside of the law. So is there any way we can actually tackle the actual concept of the use of undercover officers, because it's so deceitful and blasphemous?
Actually, when I first heard about your father's prosecution, the one thing that went through my head was the blasphemy of pretending to be converted. The blasphemy of pretending that seemed extraordinary to me. It seemed extraordinary that he's conceived that was a legitimate technique. There is an inquiry just beginning into undercover policing. Undercover policing is lawful, but there are undercover police who behave unlawfully, and the inquiry is into what first came to light of police who had relationships with women, deceiving them because they were in protest campaigns, having children with them, and then disappearing. So that inquiry is now extended because since the publicity range of other undercover policing has come to light. In your father's case, the judge, I presume, made a, I'm sorry, I'll make her, but the judge, I presume, made a ruling it was lawful. But it would be very interesting to explore the extent to which, if you obtain the consent of a woman that is not informed because she doesn't know you're a policeman, is that analogous to obtaining a relationship with someone who's giving dawah when it's a falsity? There is an equivalency there. I haven't thought it through, I'm sorry, and it's an inadequate answer, but there's something, as you say, so fundamentally obscene about the misapplication of religious faith, just as the misapplication of human love and intimacy. That there seems to be some form of argument that they should be perceived as an intrusion into fundamental rights of freedom of thought, freedom of association, and privacy, Article 8 and 10 of the European Convention.
In Munir Farooqi's case, there is something that's really important, and that various studies show that numerous people convert to Islam on a regular basis, and Muslims, as we know, are facing all sorts of discrimination, and particularly for people who are regarded as converts or reverts. What this case has done is such a great deal of fear, hostility, apprehension, and discord within the community. Imagine how people must feel towards those people who are now new Muslims. A suspicion and the type of sense people must get as to, is this person real? Are they genuine? Should I trust them? Should I bring them home? Should I be good to them? Should I keep them at a distance. All of that is something that the government should be held to task for introducing this type of feeling within the community. It can only be divisive. And as I think Nikki was saying earlier on, one of the things that needs to happen is people need to come together, but clearly one of the tactics that the government has constantly used is to divide and rule. And it's easy to divide people who are of different communities and so forth, but imagine how effective it would be to divide the same community. And I think that's also part of the consequence of this.
In fact, with Kerry Woolman, when you were under a control order from your friend Arthur Young, who is not a Muslim, MI5 approached him and said, could you go to the mosque and spy on things for us? And he said, basic fundamental problem, I'm not Muslim. And they said, oh, well, that's good, because Muslims give it extra love and welcome to people who are converting. That was the most cynical, extraordinary approach.
We've just got room for 2 more questions.
Okay, I'd like to say so many things because this throws up so many questions, but I'll keep it very short because we've got a lot of time. Firstly, I'd like to say I'd like to commend the campaigners, and I'm really glad that my comrades are part of this so-called progressive left to recognise that the working class and oppressed people who are affected by racism and so on are not just, like a few privileged trade unionists or whatever, or they're not necessarily in the Labour Party, and this includes the people who are on the receiving end of imperialist war in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Muslims here as well, inside and outside of prison. One thing I wanted to raise is this Saturday, many of you will be aware of a protest at Yarlswood Immigration Detention Centre. I'm going to leave some flyers there for it. I think it's important that a lot of concrete action comes out of this meeting, even if for some of us it'll be limited for time and so on. If we do like these pages on Facebook, we do share their materials, we do tweet them out. It's not just giving people a voice inside, as Nikki has said, but I've met many of these comrades who've come out, having been inside, having not been political, having been politicised, and indeed reverted inside prison, and they've fought battles in there. They went in there, very nice, gentle people, for crimes they didn't commit, crimes they did commit. I'll give the example of Satpal Ram, who's a wonderful, gentle guy, who was accused of killing someone as a murder. Personally, I don't care whether it was or it wasn't. It was in self-defense against racism, and he was being sent books by the organisation. He was reading about great Marxist revolutionaries, black revolutionaries, George Jackson, and that gave him strength. So we need to think, do we have any brothers or sisters inside? Do we know anyone inside? And we need to be communicating with them, trying to improve things for them inside, and for when they eventually hopefully come out. But just going back to this quickly, it's important that we make this the biggest one yet. This is another type of prison for the Muslims, an immigration detention centre where women and men are subjected to sexual abuse, where they are forced to do unpaid labour and so on. And then finally, I did want to say, whilst commending your work that you've done historically, I think we shouldn't use the rhetoric of saying Tony Blair said this and it was terrible about Iraq and Afghanistan, and then justify foreign intervention in countries which now barely even exist. Libya, for example, I'm still waiting to see the fruits of this revolution. Syria and so on. When I speak to my comrades from around these places, they weren't calling for any revolution. NATO is in there, destroying their country, and it's our job to defend their right to self-determination, not to determine it for them from the belly of an imperialist beast.
Do you want anyone responding to that comment, or Rosa?
Exactly, look for pages.
Oh, yes.
No, I want to ask Gareth, sorry, everyone's asking you your own experiences. I don't know if you have experience, I think you do, dealing with IPPs, and if you've got any experiences in challenging them?
Well, one domestic measure is now morphed into another. So the son of IPP has become something called notification of so-called terrorist conviction. So that a person who has been convicted of a terrorist offence under terrorism legislation that gets a sentence of more than 12 months is subject to notification for 10 years upwards, 10, 15, up to 30 years, i.e. practically the rest of someone's life, they're subject to provisional sentence. radicalised. So there is a whole structure now that you don't need that term that was frightening at one time, IPP. This is the new normal.
We have had no success in challenging any from the start of FPP.
There are challenges going on the whole time, legally. But one, there are decisions that IPPs are no longer to be a useful device, but that doesn't alleviate the people who are already subject to IPPs. I'm sure there's more than the your work.
I recognise you actually, and I think it's this comrade you were involved in.
Hamid?
Yes. But by and large, the only legal basis on which anyone seems to manage to challenge the imposition of an IPP now is if the judge, when they imposed it, didn't properly consider whether they could have imposed an extended sentence instead. And that's quite narrow, but sometimes it works. It's worked for one or two people outside the political spectrum who are very young and they didn't consider that. But other than that, and even if you're way years late, you can still do it. Other than that, there doesn't seem to be any such light at the end of the tunnel in that. If you've got an IPP, it doesn't matter how